Good morning, everyone. This class is in the memory of Chaim Menachem Mendel ben Yisrael ben Yomi. Here we go. Charity saves from death. Charity gathers the Jewish people together. Charity will save the world. Here we go. Don't forget not to be stingy. Everything we have is a gift from God. So don't be stingy with your love, with a good word, with a compliment to someone, a good morning. Don't be stingy. Even good thoughts. To think good thoughts about people is requires a certain degree of charity. Give of yourself. Okay. So we're learning now from the first Rebbe of Chabad, a mamar, a Hasidic discourse, and it's written in a book called Likuti Torah, and it talks about Rosh Hashanah, and it's really referring to all reality. Okay, what's the God of the Jews? We say Ein Kelokeinu. There's no God like our gods. Every other religion, they worship some sort of God, especially the ones that claim to replace Judaism, what they call them the monotheistic religions. But that's a tremendous misnomer. The idea of what monotheism is, it's totally misleading. It should be called monorealityism instead of monotheism. Because usually in religion, in these classes, theism usually means something that's not so real as the world. But there is a God. In addition to the world, there's also a God, and he especially he rules over, after you die, then you're in his hands. But meanwhile, there's the world and there's God. Says Judaism is not so. The fact is that the world is a creation, and it's being created all the time, and it's not something separate from God. God is creating it from nothing. And even more, that's only the lowest aspect of God, that he creates the world all the time. So that already sort of takes him out of the other religions in the world, that God is creating everything in the world. But even more, God is creating everything for a purpose. And everything in the world has a purpose, and everything in the world has a message, because God's reality is infinite more than our reality, but we can attach ourselves to that reality. And like we said so many times, a lot of times you get little glimpses of this, and that is in things like honesty, love, care for others, family, like going outside of yourself. Now in our generation, especially, maybe in more than any generations before, there's a tremendous emphasis on there's only one reality, and that reality is me. I'm the reality. I decide, I do, don't mess with me, my body, my choice, me, I, big I, my. And that's all that there is. There's no greater reality than me. And, when I die, so that's it. It just stops. How does it to be or not to be? That's the question. Well, after you die, are you to exist? But that's tremendously selfish and tremendously natural. But there are things like honesty, fidelity, trust, which take a person out of the world. The world doesn't have an effect on him. He is honest. He is loyal. He is right. The family is a very major thing. That you have loyalty to your spouse, to your children, to your parents. And now in our generation, there shouldn't be any more parents. There shouldn't be any more family. You don't have any more children. Children are not. That's a very viable option, and to live without children, not making it. Okay, but that's very false. So we get little glimpses of the falseness of the world without meaning. How false and impermanent the world is without meaning. And of course, the answer to that is, so what? Life is just a dream anyway. But that's not so. Life is not a dream. This world is tremendously real, tremendously important to God, and we can even feel it. And that all depends on the Jews. That all depends on the Jews. The whole world is a holy place. The whole world is very good. It says in the beginning of creation, God saw everything he made. It was very good. And come all these other religions and they say, no, the world is not good. You got to go to heaven and we can get you into heaven. Forget about this world. Judaism says, forget about heaven. You have to fix up this world. Here is where God wants to be revealed. Here. That's the job of the Jews. And that's what it means. There's nothing like our God. Ein Kelokeinu. There's nothing like our God. Our God creates everything, the heavens, the earth, everything. And what's most important is every single detail of this world. Every human being. And that's what the Jews are chosen for, is to tell everybody this. And this especially starts on Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is the day that man was created. Only the Jews celebrate this day. Only the Jews know when it was. Only the Jews care about what it was. If the other Jews knew, if the other nations knew, they would also celebrate it somehow or other. Right? This is the day of all beginning of man. So man was created in order to do exactly this, to reveal the importance and uniqueness of every second and of every human being and of every place. And that everything should be according to the Torah. The Torah is the instruction book from the creator, manufacturer's instructions about the world, and showing how tremendously important this world is. And interestingly enough, and we've said this so many times, in the 5 books of Moses, it doesn't mention heaven or hell at all. God wrote the whole thing. He could do whatever he wants. He could give the ultimate punishment is you're going to go to hell. And that's it. You better not mess with me. And it doesn't mention it once. I figured give it one mention, a little bit, somewhere near the end. Moses says, P.S. If you don't do the above, you go to hell. A little something, right? Stick a little line in there in the 5 books of Moses, nothing. Nothing. And in fact, in all the books of the Torah, it's totally not stressed about, that's the punishment. And the reward of going to heaven is also not stressed. So it's not because these exist, but don't take your attention off the main thing. And what God is mostly concerned with, and that is this physical world. Okay. How do the Jews reveal this oneness of God in the world? Okay, first of all, we have to realize that it's mission impossible. You cannot reveal the oneness of God in the world. It's impossible. God purposely, when he created the world, he hid himself. And he hid himself with 1,000,000 concealments. Concealment after concealment. That's what all these books of Kabbalah talk about. And how God is infinitely, infinitely, infinitely concealed from us. Concealed from us. But the fact of the matter is that God is infinitely, infinitely at the same time close to us. He's creating us. How can these two opposites be together? So the answer is they can't. It's impossible. Impossible. It's inconceivable. You can't even get that. But that's the way it is. And that's what it means that God is inconceivable. That's what it means there's nothing like our God. He unites all these opposites. Okay. So how we do it? So it says, well, one way you do it is you arouse, you have to love God. You start to love God and you feel the love of God. It says, yeah, but that's not so easy. I mean, we have, we're part of the world. And just like God is concealed from the world, God is concealed from us. And we're participating in this concealment. We're even enjoying it. And that's the way God made man, that he would enjoy the concealment and he would have to change his nature. And it's very difficult. You have to change your comfort zone, your comfort zones. Sometimes there's millions of them, one inside of the other. He says, how are we going to do this? So he says, well, simple, just, start loving God. So he said, well, okay, let's give me another option. So he said, okay, you got tshuva. Tshuva means to return to God. Tshuva means that you admit that I can't do it. God, I can't come close to you. And God says, oh, there's no prayer. You want to come close to me? Stop doing the things that you say, strengthen your distance from me. Strengthen your distance. There's the story, the Baal Shem Tov tells even the mashal, the parable of the shofar, that a king once sent his son far away to a faraway place. There's a lot of different versions of this. But essentially what it is, the king sent his son far away to see if his son would be loyal to him. And the son enjoys it there, enjoys it. He just completely forgets about his father, forgets about everything, right? And then one day he decides he's going to come back. He comes, he comes back, or he comes back by accident, whatever, to the king's. And he remembers and he screams out, "Father, Father," like a shofar. It's a long story, but I'm just telling you a short way. In other words, God has put us far away so that we should search from him, and we enjoy being far away. Enjoy being far away. There's this thing called, what is it called? The Amsterdam effect or something like that. There was once a woman that she was kidnapped by these robbers, something like that. And she was kidnapped and held for ransom, and nobody wanted to ransom her. So she liked it, and she became part of them. And she went on, did robberies and everything. She identified with them. Well, that happens with us. We're identifying with the exile. Suddenly we realize, hey, what's going on over here? So we have to get out. So it says, well, God made a covenant with us. And this covenant enables us to return to him. The covenant, a Brit. The Jewish people are B'nai Brit. And we learned last week that the covenant with the Jewish people, with God, is you have to do a circumcision. They have to remove the foreskin. The same thing, we have to remove the foreskin of our heart, our egotism, our false egotism. Very not easy thing to do, because egotism is a very, very tricky thing. And it's a very, how do you say, intimate thing. Not only is it intimate, it's us. It becomes us. It conquers our identity. That's who we believe we are. But inside, all of a sudden, we feel, hey, once again, I'm a creation of God. God put me here for a reason, and I have to do what God wants. And the whole world is screaming out, will you stop this? Come on, just do what you want. Just come on. You have your feelings. Be a human being. What are you going to be? Controlled by a book? You be the book. You're God. He says, yeah, it's a good point. I've tried that. I tried it a lot of times, and everybody else is doing it. They're getting along, but not me. Something is wrong. Something is wrong here. I have this feeling that really I'm being created, and that God is creating me. Well, maybe you should see a doctor. Maybe you should see a psychiatrist. You're being created. You're being created also, but you just don't feel it. And you're being created from love, and God wants you to be exactly who you are. Doesn't mean you have to stop being who you are. You have to start being who you really are. Right? So in order to do this, it's not so easy. So it says, don't worry, God has this covenant, and he woke it up with this Brit that he made. So, okay, that's also, I believe that, but it's still not easy. So it says, well, for that, God gave the shofar. When you sound the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, that's the screaming out of the heart of every Jew. Help me, Father, our King, Avinu Malkeinu. Is it? I want the truth. It says, therefore, so this says there's two types of the screaming out to God. One is the external heart, and one is the inside of the heart. The inside of the heart is the essence of the heart. You feel that this is your true identity. This is who you really are. It's higher than any voice. Kodesh Baruch Hu b'kavodo b'atzmo in himself. Ram Benisa is infinitely high. Like it says, Niskav Shemol Avado, that even God's name is above the whole entire creation. In other words, it's not that it's above, it means that it's infinitely far away. It's infinitely distant from our understanding. But the fact is, what makes it so distant is we can't imagine anything being so close. How can God really be so close to me? How could it be that God is really creating me? That's what it means. It's far away. It's far from our understanding, but it's in reality, it's infinitely close to us. But from our understanding, it's infinitely difficult. Why is it difficult? Because I feel that I really exist. I feel that I'm God. I'm created in the image of God. Maybe the opposite. Maybe God is created in my image. Maybe I'm the boss over here. And to admit that I'm not the boss is going against your nature. So God, in his essence, he's infinitely far from our sense of reality. Like it says, Niskav Shemol Avado, that God's name is elevated very high. We did this yesterday. Niskav Shemol Avado, Even God's name, from which, I'm sorry, that he creates the world, which we said that's the lowest aspect of God. This is infinitely far from us. What is infinitely far? The late machshavat afisabe. There's no thought that can possibly grasp what God is. God created the whole world, and he creates the world every instant. And it does not change him at all. He does not expend any energy or force. But how can that be? I mean, he's creating the world from nothing. God is creating it from nothing. So it must be that he takes up a little space or energy or something with his word. He speaks, he does something. It says we was only saying that to make us understand a little bit of what God is. Now you might ask a question, why does God care about what we understand? God is infinitely far away from us. He's infinitely far away. If he's so far away, so obviously he doesn't care. I mean, he's far away. But you care what's going on in the planet Zork, which is in the 50th, whatever it is, the solar system. You go left from the Milky Way. So what do you care? And people they postulate maybe there's people from outer space. But go, okay, but we care if one person from alien from outer space up there and 50 billion light years away. If he didn't pay his electrical bill or something, we care about that. If he lied, if he cheated. What do we care? And God cares about every single person in the world. God is infinitely further away from us than a billion light years. How could he possibly care? So the answer is he does. And it's impossible to understand. That's what it means. There's no thought that can possibly grasp how real God is. God didn't change at all. He created all the worlds with all the light worlds, the light years, and the nebulae. He's creating everything all the time. The nebulae in those worlds, that's nothing compared to the angels. It says each angel is like 3 times or 1/3 as big as the whole universe. Whatever that means. I don't know, but God is, and there's an infinite number of angels, and all of them are screaming out to God because God is so real. God is not just sitting up on a big throne. He's doing that also in the visions of Ezekiel and everything. But the fact is that God is creating everything. Okay, so when we feel that God is infinitely far from us and he's creating the world just for us, that we should serve him, that we should love him, and we don't love him, we love ourselves naturally. So when we feel this, we feel that God, you are created, you are there before the world, your name is alone. Like it says, Melech HaMoromim, like we say that God is a king that's elevated above before time. That was before the world was created. God existed. We've said this many, many times before. When the world was created, God created time. So there really is no such thing as before the world, because the whole term of before and after is only when God created the world. So God is infinitely higher than before or after, because we're comparing him somehow or other to the world, right? But you can't compare God. You can compare aspects of God to the world. That's what Kabbalah does. But Chassidut deals with those aspects, but also to show the essence of God. A creator. That's what it means. In order for God to be a king, God being a king, that's the same thing as God's name. And that aspect of God is infinitely higher than all the worlds. And also right now, now that there is time, God created time. Nevertheless, God is still exalted and elevated and the higher than them. That the essence of godliness is not in the worlds in a revealed way. Like it says, that God is a devouring fire, like the nature of fire, that it goes up. Al derech mashal. So here we see on one hand that God is infinitely good and he's creating us and we're here. But on the other hand, when we start to understand what's going on, how is it that God is creating us? So it's impossible to understand. It's impossible to understand. But on the other hand, it's a commandment that we have to try. That's the motto of Judaism, Shema Yisrael. So here we are, we're trying to understand something which is essentially incomprehensible, but incomprehensible. But the fact of the matter is that there are aspects of God that we can understand. And at least we can understand that God is above understanding. So therefore, we start to rely less and less on what we understand and what we think. Because we see with all of our intelligence and our genius and our this, we don't understand anything. But on the other hand, you have to, the whole Torah is understanding. The whole giving of the Torah is understanding. You read the Talmud, you have to have a good mind, right? You have to hold one idea in your mind. And then there's commentaries that know all the ideas and they put them one to the other, they compare them. How can it be that it says this over here? Another place it says the opposite. And it says, but maybe it's not the opposite. It says in a third place that explains these two apparent contradictions. So you have to understand, right? And these ideas, and the same thing with Chassidut, understanding God. But you have to understand that what we're understanding is reality. And reality, you can grasp a little bit of it, but it's not the real thing. It's almost like, there's these people who are like philosophers. There's a branch of philosophy. What's it called? I even forget what it's called. Anyway, no, it's not epistemology. Maybe it is. Maybe it's, anyway, so they philosophize about what is beauty and what is harmony, what is love, what is this. And it could be that all those people that do it, they personally themselves have no sense of harmony, no sense of beauty. They don't love anyone, they hate everybody, but they have tremendous genius minds. And they can bring you from sources from people you never even heard of. This great Babylonian wise man, he said like this, and this Chinese, according to Chinese wisdom. And it says over there in the Indian wisdom, and they compare them one to the other. But they themselves have none of these aspects, right? Like the marriage counselor goes home and beats his wife. In other words, there's understanding something, and then there's reality. Understanding reality. And then there's reality, actually reality itself. So here we're talking about understanding actual real reality, understanding things that cannot be understood, because we're talking about God. But whatever little bit we can understand, we have to try to understand. But it's very important to understand one thing, that man is made in God's image. And so from us, we can understand a little bit, at least we can go in the right direction of what God is. Because everything that comes from God, or Ein Sof, in the world is a tremendous descent from God, from high to low. It says, this is like water. Shalosh shayach ela achar kama mini tzimtzum. It's only relevant after many contractions of illusion. Let me make this bigger over here. Oh, there it is, talking about concealment. The whole thing is, there we go. Therefore, God is called but revealing God in his essence. Lo shayach shum hashba. God cannot give over his essence at all, not in a way of how filling the worlds, not being even above the world. To say that God is above the world is so great. He's above the world. This is a little bit of an insult to God. This is an insult to God, right? It's almost like saying, the greatness of human beings. Human beings are more intelligent than monkeys. That's the greatest thing you can say about a human being, right? You get a Tolstoy, a genius person. The Freud, that Freud is Einstein, right? He was more intelligent than the most intelligent monkey. Says that a nice thing? Write that on his gravestone. More intelligent than the most intelligent. That's a big insult. It's the same thing by saying that God is above the world. He's infinitely above the world. That's an insult to God. How can you compare God's reality to the world's reality? It says, therefore, God is called El Elyon. He's called upper God, Kalomer, Shehu Ram Venisa. He is elevated, infinitely high. Elyon, whatever you live in Yiddish, they call him the Eberster, the highest one. Because on one hand, God is incomprehensible, but on the other hand, God is very close to us. He cares about us. We pray to God. We say, God, please heal Uncle Sam or Uncle Joe, right? Please give me money. Please, God, to save the world. So God is listening to our prayers. That's one of the 13 principles of faith, that God listens to our prayers, answers our prayers. So we see that there's all these things which are totally not, how do you say, what's the word? Compatible. Oh, they're not compatible with God. On one hand, God cares about us and he's creating us and he listens to our prayers, but he's infinitely higher than all the angels. It's not relevant that he should listen to our prayers at all. nevertheless, from there is drawn down for a person. That's where the screaming out comes from. That's where the screaming out of the shofar comes from, above understanding, not to be separated from God's oneness. That your heart should be flaming like a flaming fire, that goes up on its own, beli tam v'dat, without any comprehension or understanding, to pour out your heart to God, and to give your soul for Him. In other words, God is not a person. God is not a being. God is not a thing. He's not an existence. God creates all existence. God creates all being. He creates the spiritual. But on the other hand, He creates me too. And he cares about the world. And the world is in a terrible state. It's not the way it's supposed to be. There's disease and there's pain and there's confusion. And the only one that can really fix it up is God. And God put the world in our hands that we should do it, but we can't do it without God's help. But we just finished saying God is infinitely far away from us. How can it be? He says that's true. But nevertheless, that's where the Jews come in. Chelek Hashem Amo, that a part of God is His people. Yisrael, the Jewish people, Olu b'machshava. When God created the world, He created it with a purpose. So this world, of course, God did not have to create it. But once He decided to create the world, He created the world for the Jews to fix up. Why did He create the world? This is that God gets pleasure when we do what He wants against our nature. That's a thing that God can't do on His own. That's what it means. L'cha omar libi. That's what it says. To you, my heart says. It's in Psalm number 27. We say it every day. Search for my face. God says, please look for my face. Penimiyot alev, the inside of the heart. The inside of my heart goes out to the inside of God. Hainu al yedei et panecha Hashem avakesh, that I search for your face, because the achrei Hashem li'alechu, that's what it means, going after God. We're talking about the outer level of love of God. We said there's the external heart and the internal heart. Here we're talking about the external heart. And this is, that's going after. Namely, we try to understand how far away we are. We realize we can't understand. This causes us to scream out to God, because God is ultimate reality. He's creating us. He's creating us to be close to Him, and we're not close to Him. So that's the screaming out of the heart, the external heart. But then afterwards it says, Bakshu Panai. Afterwards it says, my heart says, look for my inside. So screaming out to God from the outside of the heart, that's understanding. We understand how far away we are. We understand that we should create. We understand how good God is. We understand a little bit God is creating me. Our understanding brings us to something which is above understanding. That's the external heart. But what's the internal heart? This is drawn from God doing something to you. This is God in His essence. This is loving God with all of your being. That's what it says. From the depths, I will call out to you, God. Psalm number 130. Let's have a look.
130, I think.
130, yeah. Yes. Psalm number 130. Let's have a look over here. Now, here we have a whole book of Psalms. Yes, that's right. 130. Here we have a whole book of Psalms, right? King David, 150 Psalms. And who is he writing to? God. We just finished saying that God is incomprehensible. We can't understand what God is, inconceivable. What God is, even to say that God is inconceivable, that's an insult to God. That's an insult to God. Again, like it's saying, like Einstein is so smart, even a monkey can't understand him. That we're saying, God, you're so great, I can't understand you. That's what you're saying about God. But nevertheless, that's the fact. So when we start thinking about that, then we realize that God is reality. God is not this big, Wizard of Oz sitting up there in heaven. And he's like, that God is creating us. But And God is infinitely involved in us. It's not just a show. God is making, this is reality. God is making reality. So it says that when we try to understand God and we realize that we can't, so that's screaming out to God with all of our soul. But when the soul itself screams out to God, the soul itself, it's not dependent on our understanding. It's an automatic thing that's screaming out to the essence of the heart. Therefore, we say this ma'amakim from the depths. We say this in the 10 days of tshuva. The 10 days of return, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the 7 days between them. By means of this upper tshuva. Tshuva means the inside of your soul screams out that it wants reality. And the umkat liba from the depth of the heart, ki rav amar ozvo et Hashem. It is bitter, thinking about how God has distanced himself. And it's very distant from God's face. Asher naga ad nefesh mamash, it touches the essence of your soul. B'kirav ish v'lev amok, from the depth of the heart. Like I said yesterday, I buried my grandson. My grandson passed away, 12 years old. Strange thing, strange and so people cried, but there was all sorts of different types of crying. Different types of crying. And I mean, who am I to judge what it is? But there was crying which came from, a sad situation. And you cry, a sad situation. People cry for movies. They see movies, they cry. They read a book, they hear a story, they cry. They hear a story. And then there's crying, because a person feels he lost something. He worked so hard, he did something, and then he lost it. And then there was just crying for absolutely no reason. Absolutely no reason. Just for the intense tragedy of the whole situation, of the reality, the reality which could not be grasped. A human being is, infinite. And especially if you care about human beings, so you see that everybody's personality is different. Everybody has some good qualities to them, and that just gets lost. So you feel, and it's not going to come back. I mean, it'll come back in the raising of the dead, but, we're not talking about day to day. You don't see the raising of the dead every day. So you see something like that, he's gone, he's not going to come back. He's infinitely far. Something so good and so wonderful and so, human, it's, that was available every day. And it was part, and all of a sudden it's gone. It's not going to come back. What are you supposed to do? What's that? And the heart screams out. It's the same thing with Hashem. We realize how good God is and how wonderful God is. And we can think about how God is and how far away we are. That's crying, but that's all crying for reasons. When you feel how infinitely far away I am from the truth, and deep down inside of your soul, you feel the truth. Now, this is mostly the Jewish people, maybe solely the Jewish people. We're saying that comes from the depth of the Jewish heart. And when we scream, that's the sound of the shofar. And by means of this, it arouses also above that God answers us. Liot karaticha Hashem, I am calling God out from what's concealed. Elagilo, to be revealed. That should be revealed the inside of God's kingship. So that's the idea of the screaming out of the shofar. It's the screaming out of our heart to the Creator. Then God gets revealed to us. Like it says, Mirachok Hashem nirali. So a very basic principle in Judaism, God reacts to what we do. When we pray to God, God reacts. Maybe not the way we want, maybe not in the time we want, but for sure, every prayer has its effect. It could be a little delayed, like Moses prayed 515 prayers to go to the land of Israel, and that was 3,300 years ago, but we're sure that it's going to be answered. That's the idea when we sound the shofar in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah. we also sound the shofar. The shofar is sounded after the reading of the Torah, all 30 blasts all together. We do that 3 times, and then we do that 3 times, and then we do that 3 times. And altogether it comes out to be 30 blasts. We do that after the reading of the Torah. But we also do it in the middle of the Musaf prayer, the extra prayer. And there we do it when we say these 3 extra blessings that were stuck into this prayer. And one of the blessings is making God a king. We sound the shofar over there. We sound the shofar over there 10 times, 10 blasts. And then, and then the second time is Zachronos, making God remember. And the third is with shofar. So we talked about sounding the shofar for Malchut, to make God a king. That's what we said before. We also sound the shofar to make God remember. What does it mean, make God remember? What does he have to remember? I thought he was infinitely close to us. It says, yes, but you have to remember that he's also infinitely distant from us. That's what it means, God's remembrance. Remembrance applies to something which is far. We say, Ata Zocher Ma'aseh Olam. We say in this prayer, in the Musaf prayer, when we add it on, the prayer about remembrance, we say, God, you remember the world. The world is far away from the face of God. Right? Go ask anybody in the street, right? Is Alaska real? So what are you talking about? Is Alaska real? Of course Alaska is real. You ever been there? I see it on the maps. It's everywhere there. Okay, is God real? I mean, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? Where is God? Is he real? I mean, the religious people, they pray to him, but excuse me. God purposely made the world in such a way that he's infinitely far. He's further away from us than Alaska. And I guarantee you that most people in the world have never seen Alaska, and that everybody in the world believes Alaska exists, right? The North Pole. The North Pole exists. Who went to the North Pole? I think who went there? Byrd or somebody went there. Admiral Byrd, whoever went. That was the North Pole, the South Pole. I don't. One person went there. Who goes up there, right? There's no even polar bears up there. What's up there? No, but everybody believes that it exists. What about God? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. Religious people believe it. Why not? Could be. Because we're infinitely, that's the way God made the world. We are infinitely far from God. And we have to arouse God's remembrance, and that he should love us. And we should come to love him that God should come to love us. We arouse his love from his essence and his very being. Yisparech. Al Yadeh, how do we arouse God's love for us? By means of the shofar. The shofar is the screaming out of the inside of the heart. That's what the shofar is. And by our screaming out, God, we want to be close to you. We want to, why? God says, listen, there is no why. That's just what it is. You know, a person, God forbid, his father passes away. Like we say, God forbid somebody he loves passes away. He feels it the essence of his heart. If it's his next door neighbor passes away, or he reads in the newspaper that people passed away, what was he kid? Doesn't affect him. And we're saying, God, you're infinitely close to us, but we're reacting to you as though you're somebody we read about in the newspaper far away. We don't care. And we realize that's really wrong. That's really wrong. And especially the Jews feel it in the inside of their heart that God is our Father, and we're treating him as though we read about him in the obituary, or maybe or somebody else's father. And we realize suddenly, wow, that's wrong. God is creating everything. And we scream out with the essence of our heart, please, God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't know. I mean, listen, it's not my fault. But on the other hand, I'm far away from the truth, and I want to get close to you. Now, we're not talking, notice, we're not talking at all about rewards or punishment. The punishment itself is not to feel the truth. That's the punishment. And the reward is to feel the truth. That's the reward. And even if we feel that for one instant, that one instant is an instant of truth. And it's better having an instant of truth than a whole life of lies. Right? People live their lives and they have all the pleasures they want to. They're billionaires. They go to incredibly wild, parties and take drugs and do everything and have all these pleasures and pleasures on pleasures. And there's no end to the pleasures they have. Their body's not big enough to contain all the pleasures and the money and the power and that. And in the end of the day, the person says, "What have I really accomplished? What have I really accomplished? What have I really got? You got all this money. All I have is just me. I have to call up on the phone or look somewhere to see that the money is still in the bank, that the bank still exists, and all the pleasures I had today, they're gone. Right? They're just gone." On the other hand, God is infinitely real, and it's the truth. And we see that there's a lot of people that are willing to give up their lives with their pleasures, with their money, with everything for the truth, just for honesty. Right? They have in America these things called whistleblowers. They come out and they say, "Hey, listen, the whole FBI is crooked." And by means of opening my mouth and telling you this, as it could be, number one, nobody's going to listen to me. And it could be that I'm going to get killed and that I'm going to lose everything I have and lose my job. But at least I got the truth. And those people don't have the truth. What are you going to do with the truth? You can't take it to the grocery store and buy something with the truth. I don't know. It's just the truth. I can't live a false life. I know in my heart what's going on. It's wrong. I have to say it. Right? And even if nobody listens, God listens. God listens. And that's called the Jewish people. We're talking about the source of truth. The source. And that's screaming out of the shofar. And now, before we go to the next, let's learn the Sikha of the Rebbe. I have to stop a little bit early today because we're making minions. I have to make a minion in my house for my son. Tragic situation. Here we go.